You
Is
have
there a
to.
way to do it or
Oh,
not?
I don't think so.
All right.
No. You just close your eyes.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. If you know me, you might know that my name is Jackie Mancuso. If you're new to me, that's who I am. And today I have Steve Gillespie as a guest. I met Steve about a week and a half ago. I actually didn't meet him. I just saw him at this comedy show called The Dose. It was hosted in Chicago, and it was interesting to me because it's blending comedy and psychedelics. So it was an arrangement of different comedians, and everyone was tapped into something, depending on what their choice was that day. And Steve was the headliner, and he brought it all together with the tongue in cheek way of looking at life, but then it all wrapped up with the message of psychedelics are here to help you connect to the energy of unity and oneness and love. So there was something about Steve the whole night that I just wanted to talk to that guy, and then I found my opportunity. So thank you first for coming on to this interview with me. And I want to start out by just letting you talk about who you are, and let's focus on the dose. Where did the dose come from? Why are you doing that?
So you want to start with the dose first? Okay. So we started doing it back up in I think August of 2023 was the first time that we tried to pull it off in Denver, Colorado. And kind of how it came about, I had gotten booked to do stand up um, at a psychedelic, like at a EDM festival in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I had kind of already been experimenting a little bit with psychedelics and performing, just in regular shows, but I wasn't like being open about it. I was just kind of doing it,
Yeah.
and then performing, and then I kind of was liking how I was feeling on stage, and just kind of liking how, um, just feeling a bit more connected and open on stage, and I wasn't like getting like blasted or anything,
Mhm.
but um, so then when I got booked to do that show, I, it was a festival that was going on for 3 days. It was an outdoor festival. Most of the people there were on some sort of psychedelic. So I kind of felt like that was a good moment to really like really push it and see, what I could. I wasn't worried about being too, you know, under the influence, I guess,
Sure.
for that show. And it ended up going really well, and I really enjoyed the experience. And it just kind of gave me some confidence. And a lot of people had come up to me after the show. It just kind of seemed like people were really into it and connected with it. And it had been something that I'd been thinking about um, for a while, and kind of just like moving towards that direction. And then yeah, and then there's another. I don't know if you remember Nick Dean. He was the guy that was juggling and hosted the show.
Yeah.
Very good friend, and we had kind of talked about it. And then the DJ Kelsey
Hmm.
um, was interested, and we the first one that we did was in Denver at this place that's now no longer open called New Conscious. But New Conscious was a after hours kind of place, sort of like private club membership. And that's kind of what we thought we had to do at first, because we just didn't know, if it was going to be, if we could do it
Right.
openly.
Right.
Um, yeah, so that's where it started, and it's just kind of grown from there. Yeah,
I can
I mean,
imagine.
I did another festival in North Carolina previously to that. That was another sort of experimental festival too. So yeah.
I can imagine using psychedelics like while you're on stage can definitely make you feel like you're more tapped into the audience, you're more connected to the audience. Because especially
Yeah.
like if you think you're the lone wolf, you're the only one who's tripping balls. It's like, oh, everyone's looking at me weird. But
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
know that you're in a group of unity, right? I can imagine that the jokes just flow more, and you kind of already tap into what the people want to hear. Do you experience that kind of stuff?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely do. I mean, it's definitely experimental, and it's definitely taking some chances, and it doesn't always clique. Uh,
There was
um,
there was a girl who was not having it at the Chicago show. I'm sure you remember her right in the corner.
yeah, to the right. It's interesting because that's what we all thought too, and I think a lot of the audience had thought that as well. But she like ended up following us on Instagram. She like posted a nice thing about the show. So that's the other thing too. You just never know. Like people are, especially when they're in the front row, they know there's some eyes on them, so they don't. Some people just aren't as open and comfortable being in that sort of spotlight. So it is always interesting when you think someone's not having a good time, but then you find out later that they are. So
You never know, right?
yeah.
Did you ever hear from the guy that tripped and had a tumble?
Uh,
You handled that like a pro, by the way.
Thank you. I talked to him a little bit after just to make sure that he was able to get home safe, and he had a friend with him and stuff. So and they weren't driving, and so yeah, I
For
think he
sure.
was he was more under the influence of alcohol than anything else.
For sure.
Um, yeah.
Have you had any other interesting scenarios when it comes to being in a room full of people like that?
It's been interesting in the sense that we have. I mean, that's probably the most disruptive thing that's happened in our show, and that wasn't even. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad. I mean, he just kind of was a little too drunk. But honestly, like, and maybe even surprisingly so, like, we haven't really had people that have been out of control or disruptive. I mean, we'll have some like funny heckling moments and stuff like that, but nothing too out of, the stuff that's really out there has always been regular stand-up shows where people are too drunk. And it's usually alcohol. That's the culprit.
For
But
sure.
yeah, the crowds that have been showing up for the psychedelic show, I feel like are they're pretty experienced and they understand what they're getting into,
Hmm.
and just it's a much more of a community vibe, and I feel like people are pretty positive and don't want to be disruptive. And, you
For
know.
sure. That's an interesting perspective for anyone who might be watching who's never experienced psychedelics, because in our society we're told that like they're so bad and you're going to go crazy and you're going to, turn into this piece of shit, but that's exactly what alcohol does, and that's free and available everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, it is an interesting dichotomy there. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that I mean. You're obviously pretty supportive of the community and what we're doing, but we've had other interviews where people are really don't. They're kind of pushing it as
Yeah.
far as trying to push a certain narrative, and we really are trying to combat that as much as possible. And just like and those people haven't been to the show, and they haven't, they probably haven't been to any sort of festival or some sort of event that where people are doing psychedelics. So they have made up their minds, without even really experiencing it. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. There's definitely, I mean, I teach about that all the time, how there's so many projections of shit put onto stuff by the media, by movies, whatever.
Mhm.
And yeah, I am super supportive of what you guys are doing. I think it's amazing. Psychedelics for myself, they started in high school, and it was a party thing. It was different. It wasn't really, I don't know what I was looking for, so I put them away for some time. And
Mhm.
then mushrooms found me again a few years ago, and it just turned. It was after my spiritual awakening that mushrooms came back into my life, and now they have
Mhm.
been just an amazing way to connect and learn things that you can't possibly learn in our sober state of consciousness. So I appreciate that you're spreading the word that they are helpful and not just this crazy, oh, see cool stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I also have some experience in the retreat world and in that like quote unquote healing world. I've worked as a facilitator at a retreat, a psilocybin retreat in Jamaica. So I have sat with people who have done, very large doses, and yeah, yeah, I do think that there is a place. That's the thing that another thing that we're kind of running into is that we love the spiritual and healing communities surrounding psychedelics. I mean, it's amazing. What they're doing is fantastic work.
Mhm.
Um, we I think sometimes those groups try to, or those people that are really involved in that, try to kind of put us in a box of what we're supposed to be, and as a show, and we're pretty pretty steadfast that we're a comedy show. first and foremost. And if people feel good and connect and meet people within the community, there's going to be healing that comes from that, and that's great. We're all about that. But we're there to entertain first and foremost. So
For sure. And yeah, that's yet again another projection of this group that sees the medicine in this way and you must do it this way. Like,
yeah, yeah. And I do think like, you know, again, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody that's in that world or use it that way. I do think there's definitely a place and space for that. But I do think sometimes it gets, you know, something that gets lost in that is like how much fun this stuff can be too.
sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah, everything's a tool and you get to use it however you want to use it.
yeah, yeah.
So, how did you first get into this world? How did you discover this world?
Psychedelics.
Mm.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because, you know, just based on some of the stuff that you had sent. You know, it was kind of like a slowly sort of getting more and more exposed to it. I mean, I think with the big thing for me was you know, growing up, I was put on prescription drugs when I was really young. I was like 9 or 10 years old. Put on, you know, I was diagnosed with ADD and put on Ritalin and, you know, put in the learning disability classes and just kind of didn't really fit into the, you know, 8-hour school day sort of thing.
Right.
Um, and then had some as I got into my 20s, I was having some pretty serious depression issues. Then I was like got on prescription drugs, SSRIs. So I think what was happening or how I really got into it was the SSRIs were I think affecting me pretty negatively. And I was kind of looking for some other options or things to get into that may be more effective, and just kind of started with mushrooms, and then I ended up getting off SSRIs after a while, and then, you know, then I was like a little more comfortable with trying to maybe try some other things like LSD, DMT, uh, that sort of things, and yeah, it just kind of slowly became more and more a part of my life. So,
I again with the like the mainstream way that we look at alcohol versus psychedelics, and now the mainstream way we look at prescription drugs versus
mhm.
psychedelics. I'm totally on the side of like use the medicine. There's
Yeah.
so many things that we think are supposed to fix us, but my perspective of humans is that like none of us are wrong, none of us are built the wrong way. It's just we're
Hmm.
forced into these systems, we're
Hmm.
forced into this 8-hour school day, we're
Hmm.
forced into trying to be a 9 to 5 job, and we're just way too creative and chaotic for all of that. So
Yeah, chaotic's the right word for me for sure. I have a really chaotic life, and not in a negative way necessarily, but just
right.
yeah.
Well, especially being a performer, being a comedian, you have to be chaotic so that you can create. Creation doesn't come from doing the same thing every day, day in and
Mm.
day out. You have to go explore and try new things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, do you have any stories from any of your experiences that stuck out, or like, are there any? I guess what have you learned from the world of psychedelics?
Whew. Um,
My
man,
whole life.
so many things. I mean, I think, that's tough. Yeah, I think that, in my opinion, what I think is happening in a trip on a basic level, um, is that it's taking you out of the structures that have been built in your mind. So kind of the grooves that have been built in your mind. Or you know, people call it ego, personality, and that structure of your mind that I think that we all very much are identified with, certainly through childhood, and that's where it kind of all developed. And then those patterns and structures kind of become really strong and really almost the word I'm looking for, like impulsive.
Okay.
Um, and I think what's happening is that in a psychedelic state, you're being pulled out of that structure of your mind and much more to your default state of being. I mean, people get there with with years and years and years of meditation and spiritual practices and stuff like that, which is great. I also learned through those things, but I do feel like psychedelics are a bit of a cheat code, or at least speed up the process. And I think that's what I have really learned throughout my experience with it is that um, it kind of allowed me to see what those patterns, structures, grooves in my brain were, and kind of maybe where they were coming from, and then also realizing that that's not who I am, um,
Yeah.
you know, and that I think that was pretty shocking at first when I first kind of came to those realizations or felt that. And on top of that, so that's like the basic first kind of level, I think. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, I'm starting to feel more connected with nature, connected with source, connected with, people call it God. That's fine. Um, yeah. And then just more connected to the people around me. I think that, you know, it's definitely opened me up a lot more, and has given me increase my ability to empathize with people. Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. When you were explaining that, like it's a cheat code, I had a thought about, like some people can get addicted to the escapism, right? So they want to live every day, all
absolutely.
day in this other world. Do you have anything to say about grounding or about, integrating it back into your real life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know having being conscious of why you're doing it, I think is
Mhm.
really important. Um, and having some real reasons why you're deciding to go down this path or take this trip or ingest this substance, I think is really key. I do, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do think there is um, a lot of that where people are using it to escape, which I've always found interesting. I've never really felt like a psychedelic trip was necessarily an escape. I really kind of feel like it's sort of the opposite for me. I mean, I don't want to speak for other people, but you know, especially like psilocybin, where I feel like it's really hard to hide in what's going on in your life or what's going on in your head or what's the things that you are dealing with. I think it's really hard to hide from that in such a psilocybin trip.
Mhm.
So escape, it's like it's kind of telling you the truth about yourself, and like that isn't to me. That's not much of an escape, but um, I do get what you mean. Especially when it comes to like things like MDMA, maybe even like DMT. Yeah.
What was it? In September, I had my first ayahuasca ceremony ever.
Wow,
And that
that's cool.
was, I was expecting to come out of it this like changed person because that's everything that I've ever heard about ayahuasca. You go and then you come out and you just have this whole new perspective on life. And in
Mhm,
some ways, I did. In some ways, it was just kind of like a reaffirmation of things that I had been experiencing. But something that I'm still integrating from that experience was this whole I felt like I was taken through. I feel like a nut when I still talk when I talk about this, but I was taken through this whole ceremony where whatever guides were guiding me through it, they told me that like your warrior phase is done. You don't have to work hard anymore. Like you're in retirement pretty much. And they told me that now I'm here to just like sit and relax and be grateful and honored for everything that I've been through. And that was a pretty eye opening moment because I mean, relating it to astrology, I have a pretty tough astrology chart when you look at it. And
mhm.
I've seen that as I have to overcome all these obstacles to learn my lessons to then move forward in life. And it was
Mhm.
such a different way of looking at it. It's like, chill the fuck out. You've learned enough lessons. Like, just relax now.
So
So
they were they giving you that, I mean, were they saying that during just for the trip itself or just in your life moving forward?
it to me, it seemed like a shift of my life. Like
Okay.
you've reached the point where you've put your warrior work in and now like just chill. You don't have to push as hard. You don't have to try as hard. So even
Interesting.
knowing that, whatever it was that made me see that and experience that, it's just fun to kind of carry in my back pocket when I think
Mhm.
about what I want to do next in my career, what I want to do next in my life. Like, do I have to push as hard, or is that just a mental construct that I've created because of the society that I've grown up in?
Yeah, interesting.
That's pretty cool. And
Yeah,
then,
it's something that I deal with quite a bit. I'm a pretty extremely driven person, and two, I mean, I'm starting to see more and more how that is not always a positive thing. Um, yeah, so it is interesting to hear.
have you noticed anything, I guess in your career specifically? I know this is a totally random question, but as far as like pushing to get shows or pushing to be in a certain place versus surrendering and letting things come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely pushed really hard. I mean, it's a super competitive, you know, world that I'm in. But it is interesting. It's something that I have been thinking a lot about. I don't know if you've kind of heard this ethos of like when you give it up, you get it all. That is something that has been kind of sticking with me lately. I'm a big Ram Dass guy. I listen to Ram Dass
Yeah,
almost every day.
nice.
And that's something he talks a lot about. Is just there. I do think there is a balance. I mean, I think for me, it's like you got to put the work in. You have to be prepared, and you have to put yourself out there. You have to, it isn't just gonna show up at your doorstep. But once that is done, once you have prepared, put in the work, put yourself out there, then I do think there is definitely something to be said about being able to let go and not be so attached to the outcomes of things, which I
For sure.
struggle with for sure.
It's a human thing. We have desires, we want it, right? There's a reason I want this, so I must keep working towards it. I found the
Yeah,
same thing. It's a cycle. You start with your intention, you put in the work, you face the hardships, and then you get to a point where you're like, there's nothing else I can do. Someone needs
yeah.
to pull me through this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely drive my two showmates insane with all of it. But that's it's also kind of knowing there is power in it too, and so it is to me. It's like a balancing act of like, okay, how do I harness this power, but also use it in a positive way, not a destructive way.
For sure. Have you ever had your astrology chart read?
I believe I have. It's been a bit. I know that my girlfriend and I have done it, but it was a while ago, like probably over, I mean, at least 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years ago. Yeah. So.
I can't help but keep looking at it. I have it behind my phone right here.
Okay.
And this whole surrender thing keeps coming up because I'm staring at your North Node. Do you know what the North Node is in
I do
astrology?
not.
It's your personal North Star.
Okay.
So if Steve is ever confused about what this meat suit Steve is supposed to do, you look at your North Node. Yours is in the 12th house. And I mentioned before we hopped on live, like, oh, I just wanted to look at your 12th house because people who are into this like occult mystery type of life, the 12th house has to do with endings and surrender. It's the last house before we start again in the zodiac. So that
Oh
house
wow.
holds a lot of how much you are supposed to just throw your hands up and let the world take you. So
Interesting.
your North Node does sit in the 12th house. That seems like you are here to learn how to surrender completely. Um, and then in astrology, you have a South Node, which is the exact opposite. So
Hmm.
your South Node is across in the 6th house. The South Node is what you brought in from your last life that you're super comfortable with. It can be your go to, but it's what
Nice.
you don't want to use a lot of. So your South Node is in the 6th house. That's daily service. That's working your ass off, doing what you got to do every day. So that's kind of what you can fall back on. But if you'd like some astrological unsolicited advice, the more you
Of course,
do,
I
just
do.
you let the universe take you, I feel like you can come to some really cool places in this life.
Interesting.
And with that North Node 12th house surrender for you, it's in Leo. Leo's the sign of the performer, the creator, the one who just wants to be the light. So hell yeah, comedy is your way.
So you're saying that that's The 12, okay, so that's saying that that's where I learned to let go is within this like Leo sort of performing in the spotlight, or is that like yeah,
Yes. Yeah. So the North Node is kind of like whenever I am in at a loss in my life and I just don't know how to move forward, I try to lean into my North Node, which is also in the 12th house.
okay,
So if you feel that like stuckness, or if you feel like you're not getting what you desire in the right way, lean into performing in a way that is just letting go. So actually, this Dose comedy show, it's performing through, the unseen world. So
yeah,
helps.
yeah, interesting, very cool, very cool.
That's awesome. Um, what do you see coming for the Dose? Like, has it evolved since you started? Do you see it evolving more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has grown quite a bit. And the show itself has changed a fair amount too. And just as my own, my own portion of the show is evolving. And just kind of still trying to figure out what it is I'm trying to say. I like again, I don't want it to be. I mean, this is kind of a thing that we're not fighting about it, but it's something that we're trying to figure out is like how much of my act do I want to be talking about psychedelics, and how
Sure,
much of it is just like I just want to do stand-up comedy in this space
sure.
and in this headspace. Um, and that is something that's been because I do think there's definitely some of it that I would like to. That's things that I want to say about psychedelics and things that I think are funny about the experience and that's great, but it's not something that I'm really wanting to like, okay, it has to be 45 minutes of stand up about psychedelics because I just think I don't know. It's
It
like
could
the
be
Grateful
overkill.
how many Grateful Dead songs where they mention psychedelics?
No, I don't listen to the Dead. I never did. Oh, okay.
They don't say they barely even mention drugs. I mean, they have like one song where they mention cocaine, but like they barely even mention it. And to me, it's like we're already here, we're already doing it. Why do we need to talk about like I don't know. That's something that I'm kind of struggling with, and that's like figuring out where we're evolving there.
Sure.
And because there has been some people that have been like, "Hey, we wanted more about psychedelics," and there was a woman or like a group of people at their Madison show, which was the night after Chicago, that um, they Nick was on stage, so the show had just started, and they had came up to me and they're like, "Is this going to be about your personal journey in psychedelics?" And I was like, "It's not advertised that way. It's advertised as a comedy show.
Yeah.
There will be some talk about it, but it's
Mhm.
just it's going to be funny. That's the whole point, though. We're just trying to have fun in this space, and so we're kind of like figuring out and not that those people are necessarily wrong, it's just something that they're looking for. Like we were talking about earlier, they have their projection of what this thing should be, and we have ours. So it is interesting how that's all gonna shake out. Because like we're really trying to like what's really evolved too is the pre-show. I don't know if you were there for that.
When he was juggling? Or
Juggling and the music and the
yeah.
just yeah, we're trying to like add to that and do different things that are like quote unquote trippy.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
I did
yeah.
feel when I was at the show, I did feel like I was just in like my friend's basement. I felt like I was just hanging out with a bunch of people, then we're just being goofy, and that's it. And that's the vibe that I got.
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to install or like we're really trying to just set the right vibe for people to feel comfortable. I mean, ideally people will come and they will have taken whatever they're gonna take and now they have an hour to like kind of meld into the vibe and what's going on and then we're ready to go for comedy. And like yeah, we're really just trying to it's more about just connecting and just getting the right community together and just like you said, just have fun. Like that's really what and I think the having fun and the laughing and connecting on all the different topics that can come up through a stand-up comedy show, I think is healing in itself. It might not be the type of healing that, this like grand ego depth sort of healing, but I think there's still a good place for it.
And everyone's gonna have their own experience. Like, how do I want to say this? Because when I read the description, I kind of, and this is me just being aloof myself, and I read the description, I was like, oh, comedy and psychedelics, cool. I'll find something that I like there. I didn't really have any expectations.
Yeah, that's good. Good to hear. Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're gonna attract people wherever they're at. So it sucks to attract people who have these really high expectations. But I mean, if you
Mm.
just keep doing what you want to do, you're gonna get what you need out of it, and everyone else can just learn.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, we're the people that like it, and well, they're gonna come back, and the people that are looking for something else, and again, there's nothing. It's not that they're wrong and we're right. It's just, this is art. This is what art is. So,
Mhm.
it's not gonna be this all-encompassing thing, or like every person's gonna get what they're looking for out of it, and that's fine. And it's something that I really struggle with. It's something that Nick has really been working with me on. Is like that talk about letting go. Like, we had we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had someone write a complaint about not there not being enough lasers and stuff. And I took it really, and anytime there's like a negative comment or whatever, I take it. I mean, man, talk about not being able to let go. I take it. So and Nick will just like roll his eyes and be like, dude, it's one person, and like, and
Yeah.
then to his credit, like the next time he's like, I got all these lasers now, and we're like, doing all this stuff. So that's been fun, but yeah, it is interesting as a performing, or putting your art out there, and just, I want to please everybody, but I also realize that that's not, it's not going to be in the long run the best thing for it.
That speaks right to your nodal axis, that south node in the sixth house. That's perfectionism. That's Virgo energy. That's very meticulous. Let this shit go. If you're
Mm.
not offending people, your work is vanilla. If you like, you
Yeah,
have to piss people off if you want to know that your work is doing something.
yeah, and which exactly what Nick says, and then that's another thing that I've kind of come across. And it's not necessarily a psychedelic thing, but it is something that I've come across that stuck with me in the psychedelic space. Is this idea that you don't serve warm tea.
Hmm.
You either serve hot tea or you serve cold tea.
Interesting.
Nobody wants warm tea. So, you
Right.
know, yeah. So that's something that's kind of stuck with me, and I think you're spot on with that. Where it's like, if you're pleasing everybody, then you're probably really not pleasing anybody. I mean, you're fine, and no one's gonna be upset, but no one's gonna grab onto it.
For
Um,
sure.
so
I also, when I was there, I brought up that girl who was in the front corner, who I thought was having a terrible time. And
mm,
this is something that I noticed when I was at that ayahuasca retreat. The same energy was coming back when I was in that show. When I'm in that psychedelic space in a group of people, I see everyone in the room as like a different part of myself. And
mm,
she was throwing a fit. She was not having fun. And I was like, okay, well, what part of me is not having fun right now? What is she trying to teach me about myself? And that's always
uh,
a fun experiment.
interesting. Yeah, interesting.
You ever looked at
Yeah.
it that way?
No, I haven't. That's really, yeah. I like that. That's really cool. Yeah, because I've definitely been in a lot of like group tripping scenarios, and it's always interesting to like, man, some of those retreat days and trips where people, we have maybe 15 people who are doing upwards of 6 to 12 grams of psilocybin. Like, the just range of reaction and experience that they're having is
Mhm.
fascinating, and seeing how it all kind of plays off each other and becomes almost like, what's the word, like telekinetic, you know?
For sure.
Yeah, it's cool.
I also wanted to ask about your opinion of like bad trips, because I hold the no fear belief, right? Fuck around and find out. Everything works out. You're fine. But I know that a lot of people are afraid of stepping into this world because they've heard of stories of bad trips. And I
Hmm,
can
hmm,
say, like, if someone were watching me have a trip, they would say she's having a terrible time because I'm
hmm.
bawling, I'm like working through all this hard stuff, but it needs to happen and it's healthy and it feels good when you're in it. What can you say about bad trip?
Yeah, I think hard trip is a good way to put it. I mean, certainly there is incidences of people having, um, some kind of psychotic breaks, stuff like that does happen. And I think
What does
that all
that
comes
look
down to like, sorry.
what does that look like? People having psychotic breaks.
Yeah, I mean, just an example of somebody that I um, last year, a person, and this is kind of where it comes to set and setting, right? And kind of setting yourself up to be in a safe space to, if your trip is hard, that you are going to be safe. And I do, and we're talking about large doses. I'm not talking about like, doing a gram and going out to a show or whatever.
Right.
I'm talking about, somebody takes a big dose alone. In this case, it was somebody that was alone. They took a really big dose. Seemingly they got confused. They got their hands on a gun. They were, confronting people in their apartment complex, and then I don't know if they jumped or if they fell, but they fell
Mhm.
um, off a balcony and hurt themselves. Well, they died. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, I think that, some people in our world here are kind of like shying away from talking about stuff like that, but
For
it does
sure.
happen. And I think that, when it comes to the larger dose experiences that, you're talking about quote unquote bad trips, it's more about having the support
Mhm.
set up and being in the right space to experiment in that way. And I do think people should know. I mean, I think people that are interested in doing a large dose, like, you got to be educated in what that actually is and can be. And with that said, I think what really happens with bad trips or bad experiences, I think, I would say, in my opinion, most of the time in those scenarios, it's because of paranoia. Once paranoia starts sitting and touching in, that's when it can get really off the rails.
Mhm.
Um, I think anything else can really be gotten through, I mean, if it's just like pain or just emotional pain, it can suck, it can be really hard, but it also, I think, usually when I have a trip like that, that's a painful trip, it's usually the trips that'll stick with me the most and things that I'll learn the most from and heal the most from, and then also feel like the most, positive impact after the trip. So, sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4 months after, um,
Right.
still be like, so, but yeah, I mean, it's, we all know it, set and setting, right? It's so huge, and having, someone with you or somebody that can help you keep you, in
That's
bounds.
smart. For sure. I've noticed myself as well because I've experienced by myself, and then I've been in experiences with one other person and in groups, and it does definitely change the vibe. And I want to point out that yes, that is unfortunate, right? That that person lost their life because of a high dose on their own.
Mhm,
Um, but when it comes to life and death, right? Everyone has their path. Everyone signed up for their soul contract, whatever is meant to happen for them. So
mhm.
it would make me sad if hearing that experience scared someone away from trying it at all. Like just because it happened to someone else doesn't mean you
Oh,
are
absolutely, yeah.
destined for that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I do think that knowing your own, history as far as, like, and respecting it, I mean, as far as, like, do you have issues with bipolar? Are you, is there issues of schizophrenia? Like, those things are important. And I mean, even at the retreat, like, they would turn people down. They definitely would, and because you do like a intro interview. They try to get as much information about the people that are going to be coming down, and even people that have, paid for the trip, paid for to be at the retreat. After them being there for a day or two, there has been times when they'll be like, the people that are in charge are like, yeah, we're not comfortable giving it to them.
Mhm.
Um,
That's nice
so
to know.
yeah, yeah, and it is serious stuff. It definitely is. It's it absolutely can be a positive thing, and I want as many people to experiment or to experience it as they can, but we have to be honest about the full spectrum of it as well.
Absolutely. I see a couple questions in the chat. I see that Michelle asks, "Where do you suggest we go to find good information? Do you have a reputable book or website? And would you like to share the retreat that you were working with? Would you recommend them?"
Yeah, it's called Myco Meditations, and the people that I worked with there are no longer there, so that they have a different management group that's doing it. But yeah, I mean that is one of many.
Yeah, sure.
It's in Jamaica. There's they're all over Central America, Mexico. But I think that's a good place to start. I know that they've been in business for I think over 10 years now, and have been doing retreats every week for a long period of time. So
For sure.
um, they seem to got it down pretty good. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I read, what is the one with? Uh, it's definitely one of the more popular ones. It was the Harvard professor. Is it opening the head or breaking open the mind, or what is that book called?
Not sure.
I read it, and I can't think of the name of it, but it was really good. It was really, really good. I mean, it's very like scientific, which I think can be comforting for people.
Is it
Um,
Daniel Pinchbeck?
yeah, what's the name of it? That sounds
Breaking
right.
Breaking
Yeah,
Open the Head.
that's what it is. Yeah, that's a great book. I mean, it started with Ram Dass for me, but that is very spiritual based. Which I mean, he was also a Harvard professor and psychologist, so there's certainly some science in there as well. But he's definitely more on the woo woo side of things. Um, but yeah, Paul Stamets, Paul Stamets.
Paul.
He's done a lot of really good interviews.
Yeah. Oh, he's in that fungi
Yep,
Netflix documentary, yeah?
yeah, yep. He's a really good source. I mean, I don't know. I know that Joe Rogan is very much a lightning rod for controversy, and I'm not saying I'm a huge supporter of him in any way, but he does have some good interviews with Paul Stamets. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's a good start.
I'm a big proponent for Michelle who asked that question. If you're interested in a topic, just start looking around, and whatever you're meant to find is going to find you.
Hmm.
Search the internet, documentaries on psychedelics or books on psychedelics, and something that you are meant to read will find you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
I
I mean,
also Go ahead.
I'm also kind of one of those people that's just like, well, eat a half a gram.
Same.
Just eat a half a gram. I mean, you're gonna be fine. Like you're not gonna. That's not. That's a pretty low dose, and
Hmm.
it's gonna give you a feeling of what it's like. I mean, certainly have somebody around.
Hmm.
Be in a comfortable, safe space. Um, don't go driving around or like go into public necessarily, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about it. The way you're really gonna figure it out is by experimenting. Again, if you don't, have some serious bipolar issues or schizophrenia issues. Yeah.
What was it like being a facilitator at a retreat? I've never done psilocybin in a ceremonial sense, so I'm
Mhm.
really curious what that's like.
Yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't call it ceremonial. It's definitely more of like,
Controlled.
yeah, yeah. I mean, um, we had about, I'd say it was close to 15 people that were, there to be at the retreat. And then I think we had at least, if I remember right, we had 10 facilitators. So we almost had one facilitator per person,
Hmm.
um, which I thought was good. I thought that was really helpful. Um, yeah, I love doing it. It was really cool. I mean, it was, just the wide range of what people are going through and like the backgrounds of people coming in. I mean, I think you kind of have to consider that type of person that is going to pay, you know, a large amount of money to come down to a retreat
Yeah.
to take mushrooms compared to like people like us who are like, you know, I can just do this at home.
Right. Right.
So it's definitely kind of coming, quote unquote, more from the straight world of just like more like people in the corporate world, people in the business world, people who are parents, people who are just, haven't really experimented much um, with any sort of mind altering substances. So I think that was kind of fun and cool to like, I kind of felt like I was like tripping with my parents in a way,
Right, I'm sure that
Um,
was super healing for you too, right?
yeah. And we had some people who were grandmothers that were coming down and doing it, and I thought that was really cool just to like kind of see, like, oh wow, this isn't just, and just to see how like positive their experiences were. I mean, some of them were hard for sure, but in the end, I think they did a lot for some people that kind of just, like I said earlier, were really caught in the structure of their mind, you know, and just kind of seeing their minds get blown is pretty cool. Yeah, very cool.
When I did ayahuasca, I had a whole like conversation with my mind. I met my mind as a separate entity, and it was like
Mm,
showing me all the tricks that it plays and how it just wants to be entertained. It was mind blowing. It was so cool.
yeah, yeah, that is interesting. That is cool too. Yeah, I mean, that's basically, it is kind of what meditation is the goal of meditation. So it's kind of like meditation on drugs.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
If you and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. If you could send one message to humanity about this world of psychedelics, what would you advise? What would you share?
All right. I was reading these comments and I stopped listening. I'm sorry.
Thanks for being honest. Go read the
Curious.
comments.
What do you want me to read the comments or?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Curious what the most mind-opening, life-changing psychedelic experience you've had. Man, that's tough. I don't know if there's ever been one that really sticks out because there's just been like a handful, and they kind of all come to the same space of like it's like a feeling of just this immense sadness and pain for not, but it's like not personal. It's more like our entire humanity.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and then coming along with that, especially in the psilocybin experience of just like all of that, and then it ends with it's all okay, and it's all the way it's supposed to be, and all is just kind of one big cosmic joke.
Yep.
It's all kind of one big. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters. It feels like it matters, but in the end, it's gonna be all right. Which is I've had that sort of realization and experience multiple times now.
And it makes it easier to go through tough times because you have like a deeper layer of knowing that we're going to get through this. Like everything is going to be okay. This is temporary.
Yeah, and then also it's gonna happen again and again and again
Hmm.
and again and
And
again. And it's sort of that.
yeah, go with it.
I mean, I don't know if I'm full on ready to say that reincarnation is a thing, but I mean that's certainly something that I feel like I experienced within a trip is just like the kind of knowing that this has happened before and that it's gonna happen again, and
Yeah,
the wheel of life.
I love that. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I believe in reincarnation in a radical way.
nice.
Yeah, I am you and you are me. I've been you, you've been me at some point and whenever, and we've
Yeah,
been all these people in the comments. It's a repeat for thousands and
yeah,
millions of times.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I've definitely felt that within trips too, of just being like the sense of like, oh, this is me and that's someone else. But that's sort of was like fades away more and more and more. That layer of like personal identity. Yeah. So
Very
there's can you speak a bit to like crystals and mushrooms in combination? Yeah, that's I wish my girlfriend might get my girlfriend on here. She's
Go for
really
it.
into the crystals. Yeah, I mean, I think they're cool. I don't, it's just it hasn't been something that I've done a whole lot with. But I mean, I think they're cool. I mean, I think the idea that they're storing energy or vibrations that can heal. I mean, sure. I don't know. I'm not gonna say that. I mean, yeah.
I haven't gone into depth with crystals and mushrooms. I mean, my whole house is full of crystals just because I enjoy the vibrations of them.
Mhm,
But yeah, I've
mhm.
never been called to like play with them while I'm tripping or anything, so I can't speak to that at all.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if DR has done it or herself. Yeah.
So the
What was the
question I was
question that I? Yeah. Okay. There we go.
when you got distracted with the comments, I was asking if you had one message to share with humanity regarding psychedelics, what would you want to leave with people?
Oh man, I can see why I went to the comments. It's such a big question, and obviously
Not ready for this.
avoiding it. So I need another comment. um, whew, uh, man, there's so many. One thing, huh?
What's the
I,
first thing that comes to mind?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is um, try to question your already perceived notions and projections of what the experience is or should be, or just drugs in general, and kind of question what has been pumped into your head to conditioning about these experiences and what they are. And I think having a different perspective on drugs in general, as far as like the people that do them and punishing them compared to like, if there's an addiction issue, helping them. I
Hmm.
think just kind of a realignment of what these things mean and what they could be, I think is important. Yeah, I mean, once you get past that, if you feel called to it, um, search out a way to do it in a safe way. And, you can always take more. You can't take less.
I
So
like that
that's,
perspective,
yeah, yeah,
which is very, very true.
yeah, exactly.
So, other than we talked a little bit about how you maybe want the dose to shift in the future, but what
Hmm.
else is coming for you personally? What else is coming in your career? Where are you touring?
Yeah, I mean, I've been touring pretty much nonstop for over 15 years, so it's just kind of just going and doing it. I mean, the dose is taking more and more dates as we move forward. But yeah, I mean, if you go to my website, GillespieComedy.com, my Instagram, Comic Gillespie, you can find all these things on where I'm going to be, where I'm going. But yeah, right now, I mean, the main focus is the show, the Death Show, and I think we have, God, I don't even know, maybe another 15 cities booked right now, through this year and into early next year, and it'll continue to grow. So,
Is there a
um,
separate website for the dose, or is it on your Gillespie
yeah,
Comedy?
it's on my personal website now. We're working on it, but mainly just the Instagram is where you're gonna find more stuff. So the Instagram is the Dose Comedy Show, at the Dose Comedy Show. We do have the website. It just hasn't been put out yet, which I mean, it's mostly our fault.
You
We
know,
just
you're
keep
surrendering. You're just letting it go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how helpful the website even is. I mean, basically just to have our tour dates and our promo video on there. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot else other than the description of the show. I mean, we're not really I mean, we're talking about putting together a special. I mean, that's certainly going to be somewhere down the line. We'll have a special made, and then that'll definitely be a big piece that we'll have out online. But as far as the website goes, I mean, you can see our logo, you can see our tour dates, and you can see our description of our show, and I mean, yeah. But the
Awesome.
Instagram has some clips and more like video stuff on it. So.
Do you guys have any plans to come back to Chicago?
Uh, DR had a crazy experience handing Lemurian quartz. I'm assuming he means handling Lemurian quartz. I don't even know what Lemurian. I've never even heard of Lemurian. What does that look like? Quartz on shrooms. I played. It was nuts. Very cool.
Nice.
I'll have to
Lemurian
try it.
quartz is clear and rainbowy.
Ah, okay. All right. I wonder if we have any over here somewhere. Well, very cool. Yeah, maybe I'll try it out. I have my girlfriend's giving me some stuff that I have here and there, but
Maybe
yeah.
just have it with you next time and see what happens, and then report back.
All right, I will. Yeah, I will. We are. Yeah, we will be coming back to Chicago for sure. I don't assume it'll be sometime around this time next year. Yeah.
Sweet. I will keep my eyes open. I'd love to come back and support again. It was a super fun show. Again, I just felt like I was hanging out with some friends in a basement.
All right, cool. Yeah, we are doing Milwaukee, Wisconsin in June 13th. It's
Sweet.
gonna it's gonna be our first outdoor show that
Oh,
we're gonna do. So check that
nature.
out.
Getting nature involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's in the city, but it's like in a back of a venue that had like a outdoor space. So,
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be awesome. I'll look into that.
all right, cool.
You have any last words before we say our goodbyes?
Yeah, just have fun and be safe, guys.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's
All
great.
right. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.